agent about recording.
Thank you. Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are on a listen-only mode. During the question and answer session, please press star 1 on your touch-tone phone and record your name. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any questions, any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I now will turn the conference over to Jared.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I want to thank the participants, thank the presenters, and thanks to our sponsors, the Home Depot Foundation and the Forest Service, for helping to make this possible. This is the second month of the Brown Bag Lunch Series, which is a monthly webcast series that we launched in June. The idea is that it's at the lunch hour, that it'll take no more than an hour of your time, and it will create informal training opportunities for local urban forest and community forest practitioners. And the idea is that by leveraging local successes to a larger audience, we can help a larger audience understand that organization's methods, materials, and approaches. So thanks for everyone for being here. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Alliance for Community Trees, we are a collective of about 125 urban and community forestry organizations around the country. We do things like this. We do things like the Neighborhoods Initiative. And if you're not a member of the Alliance for Community Trees, we'd encourage you to join. So today's session, just a few more ground rules. We're going to have one presenter, then questions and answers, the second presenter, then the rest of the time will be for questions and answers. We're going to cut the discussion off promptly at 2 o'clock Eastern. So if you haven't gotten your question in by then on the phone, you can also type it in online, and I will follow up with that. So I can try to get all of your questions answered as long as you type it in. Similarly, if you don't want to ask a question verbally, you can type your question in, and I'll come online and ask it for you. That all said, today's session is Natural Capitalism, Green Business Partnerships. Natural capitalism is about planned development. It takes into account the SmartGrowth model that development can be good when it is well planned. By creating a vibrant sense of street life and strong community, green partnerships are part of the equation to create healthier, safer, and more livable neighborhoods. Together, community leaders, home builders, developers, and businesses can promote this new way of thinking by ensuring that trees are a component of well-planned development. Today we have two presenters. The first is Prescott Gaylord. He is the Chief Management Officer of Baltimore Landmark Homes, and one half of the team that's positioning itself to be the next big name in Baltimore's development by developing smart and green properties. Prescott and his partner Brad Rogers met through their wives who teach together in Baltimore. Together, Prescott and Brad formed Baltimore Landmark Homes, a family of companies which all focus on green building strategies. Their construction firm, Baltimore Green Construction, specializes in environmentally sensitive residential and commercial construction, including LEED certified projects. One of those projects is the silver LEED renovation of ACT member Herring Run Watershed Association's office, which is a former bakery. In addition, their development firm, Baltimore Landmark Homes, focuses on green building as a crucial strategy for reclaiming older neighborhoods, using existing structures and infrastructure, and which don't consume any more farms or forests. Even if they're real estate brokerage, City Life Realty, a large number of their agents are certified eco-brokers, trained to help buyers understand important issues like energy efficiency, indoor air quality, and the use of natural recycled home building materials. Prescott, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Okay, so I guess the first thing I want to do is kind of explain who I am and my background and tell you a little bit about how I got to where I got. I do work in the private sector. I do own and manage businesses. But in my training and education, it's actually not where I came from. I thought I was going to be working in nonprofits or government. I have degrees in public affairs, environmental science, environmental policy, and air and land resource management. So I thought I would be, writing environmental policy for the rest of my days. Very early on, I found that I enjoyed the pace of the corporate culture much better, and I became an environmental consultant. So that's just a little background, and then I started creating companies with a social mission and with a green mission. So if we have a little slideshow here, but I want to invite you all, if you can open up another window, to look at my website, BaltimoreGreenConstruction.com. If you want to look at a little bit about what my company does. I'm just going to scroll through some of these slides as well, and try and answer the large questions. And I'll try and keep it as brief as possible, so there's more time for question and answers. Like Jared mentioned, I and my partner Brad Rogers run a family of mainly 3 companies, and they each have a social mission. They are each for-profit, and they each have a green mission. The purpose is to push the cutting edge of green construction and green development. And it's not enough to add in green features to traditional development and traditional construction. Our feeling is that has to be the primary priority. And this is kind of a strong theory and a strong position that we hold, and we don't take it lightly. When we started our companies, we actually had a discussion and made a conscious decision to make them for-profit instead of not-for-profit, because we felt that for-profit with a social mission actually could have a larger impact by showing, in a capitalist society, showing people that you can make money doing green things, not just having a business making money and then throwing a little charity here and there. It's important to us to have the full nature of the business, in fact, before the social good, and in particular the green good. And this is a minority opinion, I realize, in the business culture, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir with that. But that's what we're finding. I just heard a radio presentation the other day that there's this really cool company that out on the West Coast that does office supplies, and they give office supplies to a number of companies, and then they donate some significant percentage of their profits to various charities, and their clients and employees can choose this charity. Now, this is a very cool company, but I would submit the theory that even a cool company like that is not doing enough in the business culture. In my opinion, an office supply company should be, the primary focus should be whatever social good they're doing, not just delivering their profits that way, but finding out where all of their products come from, finding out if their staplers are made sustainably, if they can be recycled, if they're made from sustainable materials, what the embodied energy of all of their products are, and if the manufacturing process of all of their materials in fact creates social good where they're being manufactured, whether that's in a third world country or in a first world country. So I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble with a lot of companies who have socially minded charitable donations, but that's where I feel that entrepreneurs should be. If you look at Shell Oil Company, they had very good charity and social giving, but the fact is they weren't paying attention to where they were, to the social good of where they were pulling their oil. And now they were seen for a long time, and possibly still are, as a very socially bad company for that reason. You look at people like Kathy Lee Gifford with her clothing line. The fact is she was very socially minded, but if you're not paying attention to where your clothes are being manufactured, frankly, you're not doing enough, in my opinion. She said, well, I didn't know that these were all third world kids manufacturing my clothes. In my opinion, that's not a good enough excuse. You have to know. That's your job. If you're starting a company, that's what you're doing. So that's where I'm coming from. I will get off my soapbox and try and explain a little bit about what we do and about development and trees and green things in general. And I want to start with one of the general themes of the talk, and that is what are the challenges faced by developers. And while I mostly run our construction wing doing green construction, I have worked plenty in development, and I want to start actually with the benefits to developers of going green and having green be your main priority. And the fact is, in my opinion, I think there are more benefits to being green for developers than there are concerns. when we go into a community and propose developments, the fact that it's green makes residents, frankly, welcome us a lot more than if it was just, a development of houses, where residents frequently will try and put up barriers to any development. If we go in and say, look, we want to build these things in your community, and we want to make them green. We want to make them, zero net energy houses. We want to build, some commercial strip that has solar panels on them, something like that. Then the community welcomes us a bit more and will help work with us to create a good development in that community. And that's an important benefit of being for profit while being for the social good is people are willing to work with you, both in the nonprofit world and in the community world and in the government world, in many governments. So the community buy-in is extremely important. There's also some structural advantages to developers if they know alternative methods of dealing with energy and stormwater and things like that. There's a developer in my city right now who actually is trying to develop an area, and the latest thing that she did was go back to the city and say, I can't meet the stormwater management standards, so I need more money from the city or I can't do this development. The fact is, in my opinion, that's wrong thinking. What should be done is she should say, how can I deal with the stormwater management? And the fact is, where she is, it can be done with green techniques. It can be done fairly easily without that much more money. It can be done with, using bioswales, using bioretention beds, using natural stormwater management methods. The stormwater management can be done, but the fact is most developers only think about, the ponds and pipes method of traditional stormwater management. It costs a lot of money, and communities don't like it. It's frankly not good for a lot of areas. In my area, we worry about the runoff into the Chesapeake Bay, and development is a huge problem with that type of runoff. So, planting drought-resistant trees and plants and dealing with stormwater management that way is a tremendous benefit to a green developer. And the third most important way that green is a benefit to developers is just in sales. If you take two houses that cost exactly the same price, and one is green, for instance, and one is not green, for instance, which one is anybody going to buy? Even if you have no feelings towards environmentalism at all, you will most likely go for the green house because it just feels better. It's naturally lit better. You don't want to pay the higher utility bills. And for a lot of people, it just makes them feel good about themselves, which is which is really what you're selling when you're selling a house. You're selling, a place for people to live and feeling. So those are the main benefits. The main concerns that I see faced by developers, one is price, and that's true. And it's true for the following reason. It's not that green construction on its face and by itself is more expensive, because it's not. And I realize that's another radical statement. I've said it in the press many times, and it always surprises people, but green construction is not more expensive than not green construction. Good construction is more expensive than bad construction, there's no doubt about it. But the fact that you're making it green is not by itself more expensive. However, the trend in development right now is to make vinyl wrapped kind of McMansion boxes. And the reason people do that is per square foot, it's a very cheap way to build. And so if other developers are building this very cheap, awful way of developing, it's very difficult for me to compete on price just by trying to build correctly. Not even necessarily going too far into the green, but just building correctly. So price is a concern to any conscientious builder, I would say, and so that is a concern. The other thing is assumed price, which is I might have some trouble getting people to walk in my door in the first place because they just believe that there are these myths like any greenhouse is going to be 50% more expensive than a non-greenhouse, which is not true, but it's hard to get people in if they believe that. And it's a very common myth. So those are the biggest concerns I have to deal with. But we deal with them, and frankly, the benefits outweigh those concerns. There are a lot more people coming in saying, I kind of want to be green. Like, what can I afford? What kind of house can I afford if I want it to be green? There's more of those people I think that are staying away because they believe green is more expensive. So all in all, I'll take the green benefits over the green challenges, and we're certainly doing well and are going to continue our for-profit capitalistic enterprise with a social mission, because I believe it's the right place to be. I believe it's the only kind of business sustainable place to be, and it's what gets me up in the morning, and so that's where I'm going to be. So I will sign off here and take any questions, because given the chance, I will talk all day. So thank you very much for allowing me to talk to you all, and I'm very excited to hear this next presentation and to answer questions.
Thank you. We will now begin the question and answer session. If you'd like to ask a question, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your name clearly when prompted. Your name is required to introduce your question. To withdraw your request or question, press *2. One moment, please, while we wait for the first question. Our first question comes from Susan Curry.
Hi, I missed, you read your website a little too fast, so I wasn't able to get to it.
Sure. www.baltimoregreenconstruction.com.
Thank you.
My pleasure. There's going to soon be a new utility on that website. It's not up yet, but you're going to be able to click on different rooms in a house and read what you can do to make that particular part green. And that's where we're coding that right now. It's going to be very cool. So check back in a couple of months.
Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name.
This is Jared. We have a question online. Please repeat the benefits to developers.
Absolutely. The 3 benefits to developers I mentioned, I was probably speaking too quickly. I tend to do that. One is community buy-in, and that is if you come in the community telling people you're going to develop something, if you're telling you're going to develop greenness and leave green space in and develop green buildings, they're more willing to work with you and welcome you. The second thing is there are green techniques that that if you're thinking that way, allow you to solve problems. And the example that I gave was bio-based stormwater management techniques, bioswales, bioretention beds, cisterns, that sort of thing. And the third is in sales, and that is because people, given 2 products at the same price, all other things being equal, in 2 houses, people will want to buy the green house.
Okay, our next question comes from Patricia Joyner.
Hi, Patricia. You're on the air.
A developer in our city did a low-income housing development that they tried to be green, and they designed it to keep all the stormwater on site. But the city still required them to put in engineered stormwater treatment because the code said they had to, even though they could do it otherwise. Is there a short answer to how you get cities to focus on the end result rather than following the old rules for engineered techniques?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I probably should have listed that as one of the concerns, which is cities and old codes. And the fact is, you'll find that in several ways, especially if you're using kind of alternative building techniques. I'm afraid I don't have a short answer. I guess I have one short answer. How we deal with that is to get out in front of it as soon as possible. All cities have very little tolerance for starting to do something and it's against a code, even if it's the right thing to do. They have much more tolerance, I'm finding, if you, even while it's still on the drawing board, to get people high up or just whoever's going to be inspecting it and saying, this is what we're going to do. Here's all the literature, why it works. Here's other cities where it's been done. You don't want to be left. You don't want to be left behind, do you? And then just show it to them up front, and go ahead and do it. One example of that is we built a house here in Baltimore City out of straw panels, and everybody told us the city would never let us do it. They don't like stepped construction. They don't like they don't like the technique we were using, which is probably true. But the fact is, before we even started designing, we went and talked to them and sat down and explained what we were doing, and it was all fine. Had no trouble. And everybody was very surprised, but it was no problem at all.
There are no additional questions at this time.
Okay, we can move
Obviously,
on.
because I was very clear on every point.
We can, and if you have more questions for Prescott, we can come back to him towards the end of the call. We'll have our next presenter, and then the rest of the time will be for questions and answers. So our next presenter is Greg Levine. He is the program director at Trees Atlanta, where he started as a volunteer, albeit for one day, more than 10 years ago. As a program director, he's responsible for creating new projects and putting them into operation. One of those projects is the Beltline concept, or a feature of the Beltline concept. The Beltline is a 22-mile loop of historic railroad that encircles downtown and midtown Atlanta. The development concept for this loop is to increase green space, improve transit, enhance mobility, connect 45 neighborhoods, spur economic development, and foster livable communities. Trees Atlanta's neighborhood arboreta concept fits this vision well, and with support from homebuilders, Trees Atlanta is working to extend the concept to communities along the Beltline. All you, Greg. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Jared. And right now we are working on a conceptual plan for the 22-mile loop to actually include a 22-mile arboretum, which would be the largest, we think the longest arboretum in the country. It narrows anywhere from 100 feet to 200 to even 300 feet, and right now the Beltline in general is in its design phases, and as an organization we wanted to make sure that trees were a big part of the Beltline. Right now the Beltline incorporates, as Jared was talking about, incorporates development, trails, transit, and increased green space. And we, as a tree city, a city in the trees, which Atlanta is known for, really felt that this is the best opportunity to actually have a city arboretum. Next slide, please. So we hired a company called Portico, and they did some site analysis looking at what you end up having with the Beltline. Since it's a railroad track, you'll actually have it you'll have it up on a hill, and you'll also have it in kind of in a ravine. So you have these situations which makes an arboretum or an arboretum and tree planting quite difficult. So they did some site analysis also to take the history. Next. Next. I just do a rapid slide movement here. You can see there's different areas throughout the city. You can see where all the red area, that is the loop. Next. The actual arboretum goes through a total of 42 different neighborhoods. So we saw this as an opportunity to get 42 neighborhoods more interested in urban forestry, and it is a complete connecting circle. Well, not quite a circle, but as you see, it connects all of those neighborhoods and it joins them, so they each can have their own collection, but they're still part of an entire arboretum. And we saw this. The major part of this is that the development is going to follow along this corridor. And it's an opportunity not only to get the community more involved with trees, but to get developers thinking more about how trees can be included in development, thinking about diversity, being part of this group project, and also looking at more environmental ways to deal with water issues and other issues, environmental issues, than they might normally look into. Next. We have an arboretum program that we had started before this Beltline project came up, and it was, again, bringing the arboretum, which is usually in a park or school setting, bringing it into a neighborhood setting to get the neighbors and the community more involved in trees. The Beltline is basically a chance to do a 22-mile emerald necklace That's of course is I guess in Boston, and it's our opportunity to do that in Atlanta. You can see the railway going through the city, and the development in the left in Glenwood Park. That's actually a new development, which is also a very green development. Next. One of the interesting parts about this 22-mile area is that the majority of it has very little development around it. It's been desolate, old factories. Some of the areas are brownfields, so there's a huge amount of development opportunity. You also see the subcontinental divide going through the city, which basically two different watersheds going to two different oceans. Next. There's some brownfield sites that you can see on this slide. Next. Sorry, I don't have the ability to move the slides. So the Portico, which is a design firm from Seattle, actually split up the area into 14 different natural neighborhoods. So each natural neighborhood would represent a different type of planting, whether it be the west side story, which is incorporates 4 or 5 different colleges. We'll be focusing on educational opportunities, ethnobotany, and history, and using trees and the environment to do that. Or if it's the Heritage Corridor, to give a sense of what Atlanta and Georgia is, the natural landscape is all about. Already development is moving around the Beltline in this corridor. There's plenty more opportunity. The key to this is getting the development and developers already bought into this concept. So the concept plan is actually in the middle of being of the process of being developed, but you can get an idea of how they've divided it into 12 different what they call natural neighborhoods. Next. Next. As the Beltline comes into there we go. Comes into fruition, we bring in our mission into the Arboretum from the beginning, and it is to plant and conserve trees and actually maintain and educate the public. The developers and development is a key part to the city's progress in having the urban forest be healthier in the city. Atlanta is one of the fastest growing cities in the country. The development is coming, and we would like to do it in conjunction with looking at the natural environment in our trees. Next. As you can see, the vision here is to increase green space, enhance mobility, and economic development, and to create a vibrant city. That's the Beltline's vision. And again, this will not be able to take place if the developers in our community are not on board with the whole Beltline concept as well as the Arboretum concept. Next. Yeah, the Arboretum, as you can, the Arboretum is a unique opportunity for the city and for development community. And our vision is to actually start implementing the Arboretum's first mile in this next year. Next. You can see the Arboretum goals. What I'm going to do is I'm going to probably stop going from slide to slide, but the Arboretum, again, is the opportunity, a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Atlanta to really establish the Beltline as something, it's bringing it up to another level, putting another layer of dynamics to the entire Beltline. And actually the Arboretum has an opportunity to bring everything together, including the trees, obviously, green space, the transit, the recreation, and all the new development. And it can encircle new developments. Developers can be included by buying into the natural neighborhood that their development enters into, and also by using more environmental building, and also dealing with water issues, protecting trees on site, and having it. And overall, the developer gets a better, more interesting development. They have the opportunity to be part of a extremely unique arboretum concept and green concept for not just the city, but actually for the United States. It's being, with this arboretum being developed with so many parts all at the same time, and planning it not as an afterthought, but in the very beginning, we have the opportunity to create something very unique. And developers, right now, we are starting to look into getting adding in the concept into the overlay district for through the city, so that it's more than guidelines, that it's actually something they need to look into when they're actually starting to do their building. Why don't we go a couple slides? The arboretums, for those that don't know, are collections of woody plants and trees. And what we had, you can see the transit through here, and now you see actually some of the details that we end up with when you're following a trail. I'm sorry. The collections. Can you go back one? Here you go. There's the transit. This is actually in Europe, and you can see the transit along in a very narrow corridor of trees planted along it, and also the path. You can also see the development. Right now, Atlanta has just an old corridor, and none of this is planned. It's actually built. I'm sorry, none of it's built. But all the opportunity is there to do all of these things, and you can see it can be done in a fairly narrow area as well. Again, it's a pretty. We're at the very beginning of this the Beltlines development, and for the arboretum to actually be successful, we knew it had to have a concept that can be sold not just to the city and to the Beltline Inc. in partnership that are implementing the Beltline, but also to the development community. And we hope to be working with the development community in the future. And if the city puts in our concept into their overlay districts, it will be somewhat of a requirement to actually be included. I think that's really, I'm really ready for questions as far as we're finished with. I appreciate the opportunity to do this.
Thank you again. If you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your first and last name.
Greg, this is Jared. Did you approach the people who were putting the Beltline concept together, or did they approach you?
The Beltline Inc. is actually the group that will be implementing all the building and construction and putting it all together. They are the group, and they actually did not. We actually have a foundation here in Atlanta that approached us and asked us how we were going to be involved in the Beltline, and we saw this opportunity being perfect to actually include an arboretum. And we've been working on them with them for the past year and talking over the concept, and we decided to take it one step further and actually do a conceptual plan.
And are there any tips you can offer to other, tree groups, other nonprofits out there about how to put that kind of pitch together?
I mean, the key to it is already having a record. And Trees Atlanta has been around for 22 years, and we had been working in the community, the neighborhoods surrounding the city, and with developers as well, for the past 22 years. So a lot of it's just having the experience and the support already from neighborhoods and from the city. We've been working with the city for the 22 years, but actually had city contracts for the past 5 years. So we already had it in place, all of our connection, and we had a really good track record. So that was the number one. It's not something you can go straight into. I think it starts off with a lot of accomplishments, and we've planted over 70,000 trees in the city, and we continue to maintain them. So I think a lot of it's track record.
Currently, Greg, we have no questions.
Okay.
Online, we have, what railroad company was the primary owner of these rail lines?
There are three railroad companies. I know one of them is CSX, Norfolk Southern, and there's one more that owns a small portion as well. And they have, A large portion, like, over 75% of the railroad track has been abandoned. Much of it, 25% of it's been bought by a developer, and he recently has sold it to another developer, which is a good thing for the city of Atlanta because it's a slightly friendlier developer to the concept of the Beltline itself.
And going back to a question for Prescott, we have, how can nonprofit organizations form partnerships with developers, for example, in attaining canopy goals?
Let's see, in attaining canopy goals, I think in a couple of ways. First of all, we would work with any nonprofit in attaining those goals, just to give us some, kind of intellectual work. Obviously, there are many nonprofits that would know more about it than we would. So if people can tell us, what kind of trees to plant, where to plant them, and things like that, we would be very willing to work with them to make those things happen. And I think so. That's probably the key with all of them. If you're providing an important piece of intellectual work for the developer, I think they generally very receptive to that. If you're bringing something to the table, like, look, the community wants X, we know how to do that. Here's the best way to do that. The flip side of that is developers are more willing to listen if you're willing to work with them on cost. So if they say, wow, that's an expensive way to do it, it's any way to get the low-hanging fruit, or maybe have a cheaper way to plant those plants. Maybe we can build younger plants and just wait a couple of years for the canopy. Maybe we can, whatever. Can we get some reclaimed plants donated so we can put those in? Or how can we do that? If we bring something to the table and help them attain their profit goals, I think most will be very willing to work with people.
Great. And we have another example, or another question. Can you give an example of how you've implemented green building in the redevelopment of existing inner city homes?
Yeah, that's actually our bread and butter. So that's mostly what we do. Redevelopment, rehabilitation and restoration is kind of inherently green because you're using resources that already exist. The other thing is you're also using infrastructure that already exists. If you're building out in places that used to be farmland, et cetera, that's what helps create sprawl. You have to build more schools, you have to build more roads, you have to build more transit, you have to build more everything, and that's not sustainable by any stretch of the imagination. Redevelopment in older cities is obviously inherently more green. Specifically, when we do those buildings, we have found going in and setting aside space to pull out all the materials that we can reuse, even if we have to downgrade them. For instance, you pull out studs and you use them in the new construction you're doing for fire blocking. You pull out, or you can dress them up and use them as trim. Kind of the reuse of materials is a huge benefit. The other thing I would say is a very important thing is older cities were not built with good building science, and so you have to go in and make them energy efficient by air sealing these things, making them airtight, dealing with the air infiltrations, and frequently putting in newer kind of mechanical systems, which frequently will irritate the historic preservationists. So we have to strike a balance there and preserving things, which sometimes is inherently green, sometimes goes against green. The biggest example there is preservationists love wood windows, and wood windows are both expensive and not terribly resistant to mold and things like that. So that's methods and a challenge. So.
Prescott, do you have any tips for the groups here about how they can encourage developers to embrace green building on a broad scale? I think you started to touch on that, sort of with the, you don't want to be left behind example.
Yeah, well, yes. So go get the last several issues of Homebuilders magazine, and that is the trade magazine for home builders. And look at the last 4 issues. The last 4 issues all have green homes on the front of them. The last several issues all have surveys about how fast green building is growing. And the fact is it's doubling every year. It's the fastest growing segment of the building industry. Very soon I will not be on the cutting edge of anything. I will just be part of the giant wave. And that makes me happy, actually. The fact is it is coming. It's there. Everyone wants to build green because that's what cities are demanding. That's what consumers are demanding. And that's what people like you guys are demanding, and that's a good thing. So the one thing is to say you're certainly going to be left behind if you don't do it. And people aren't going to buy your product. The other thing is, like I said, there are certain benefits to knowing the green techniques that actually have a business advantage. And one is things like dealing with stormwater management, which is perhaps cheaper with green techniques than it is using traditional techniques. Advanced framing techniques, which use less lumber, is actually a cheaper way to do it than traditional building. PEX plumbing systems in residential homes are actually cheaper than using copper plumbing systems. So there are some of these benefits that actually hit your bottom line too, and you just have to think about it that way.
Specific to trees, Prescott, question is, have you ever been in a situation where the development plan called for cutting down mass amounts of trees or clearing the land completely? Do you have any tips for how to interact with that kind of situation and try to protect the trees?
That might be a little bit outside my area of expertise, and I'm sorry, given the company I'm in. But most of our development is in an urban setting, and while there are plenty of trees, as you know, in urban settings, we haven't run into much of cutting down massive amounts of trees. Our tree staving and plans is draw things a little bit different here, a little bit different there to try and save a tree here and a tree there. So I don't have much experience on a mass scale on that subject.
Okay, going back to Greg, will a management plan for the Arboretum's trees be developed? Who owns the trees, and who will be responsible for maintaining the trees? Any interpretive educational outreach efforts planned?
Right. Right now it's kind of a shared effort. The city Parks Department will be actually responsible for maintaining the green space along the Beltline. Right now, the Beltline Partnership is actually the fundraising entity, and in the future there may actually be a Beltline Conservancy, or we'd probably would have a Beltline Arboretum Conservancy that will actually maintain it to a higher level than more on a botanical garden arboretum level than necessarily a park level. There is but more than likely right now for this, we are actually doing a 1 mile of installation of both the paths and the arboretum, and we're going to maintain the trees for a minimum of the first 3 years, and the paths taking care of the much of the green space around the path, and the parks will be mowing the parks. And we're actually having a meeting next week with the Beltline Partnership and Inc. to kind of look into a maintenance plan for not only the 1 mile but 22 miles, and try to start getting an idea of what the cost and what the issues are. Much of the Beltline, as you can imagine, has invasive species issues, such as mostly kudzu and privet. And kudzu goes through a good portion of it, and it's a very high cost to get rid of it permanently, and reestablishing trees, it's just in replanting, it's only a small part of that cost. As far as demonstration, in the conceptual plan, which is going to be completed probably in the next month, they are in the concept level is obviously much broader than a master plan. There are parts of the conceptual plan that say, demonstration of dealing with water on sites and development from the trail, from paths is one of the demonstrations they want to do. But also environmental, any environmental demonstration is going to be a focus of this particular arboretum. We've looked in just ways of educating the public about trees and their needs. One of the possible first mile demonstrations was going to be just even a ring around an existing tree that shows the root zone. If you have a 20-inch caliper tree, we have an idea of having a stone dry laid wall that goes 22 feet radius around the tree, with some signage demonstrating that how far the roots go out on the 22-inch caliber tree. Because that's one of the things commonly people do not understand, that the roots just don't go down, they go out. And to our organization, who does deal with a lot of development around, that's one of the reasons why we lose so many trees, is people don't quite understand the root system. So that's one of the demonstration pieces that we've been looking into. There's we hope to have demonstration throughout the whole site, and a lot of it will be through the development community figuring out creative ways to deal with their water off-site, and figuring out how to keep it from going to our. We just had a very expensive sewer build out, and obviously keeping the water on site would help our sewers in the future. So as much as keeping water on site and keeping out of our creeks is one of the goals of this arboretum. There's been many other, where we're talking about other ways of doing demonstration, and even just having more sculpture, because the sculptures will be a big part of the Beltline, and we hope that the sculptures, we are writing into our concept plan that sculptures used as both to relate to the environment, also whenever possible to be some sort of demonstration as well. So that it is going to be a major part of this 22 miles. And as far as we're still at the concept phase, so there's no details of how that might be done, but we know a lot of it will be about water, and hopefully a great deal about preserving trees and diversity, and what trees do, I guess, for all citizens, as far as clean air to ethnobotany. So, and if you look at some of if you can see it on those natural neighborhoods, a few of them are specifically to demonstrate ethnobotany and history, and educating people of not only just the diversity, but what trees value are besides square foot of lumber and cleaning the air. There's so many obviously environmental benefits.
Greg, do you have anything to do with separating traffic types like bikers, rollerbladers, equestrians, pedestrians? For this project, it is there's not going to be a lot of active use, which means not a lot of baseball fields. Is pretty much a passive. The separation, that is the Beltline. Beltline Inc. is actually starting off dividing the 22 miles into 5 design areas, and they are starting to look into separation of traffic paths and transit. So it is being worked out that we are on a design team, but it's not, obviously we are more into the tree environmental piece of it, and not necessarily the separation of transit versus paths and road. Do you know if the Parks Department's budget's being increased to cover the extra responsibilities?
They're starting to look into it, and they've also increased their budget this past year. This is the first mile. It's talking about a 25-year project. It's going to have to be increased. There's no doubt. And an arboretum is going to have a slightly higher cost than a park would. From our standpoint and many of our supporters, the area was going to be planted into a park. No matter what, it was going to need trees along the trails to make them usable. If you've been to Atlanta in summer, it's pretty miserable without shade. So it's, as far as the parks and increasing their maintenance, there's a study right now to look into the maintenance, and the Beltline Inc. is really in charge in looking into that. And the partnership, we're hoping, will help increase the funding. But part of what's been really good for us to encourage the arboretum concept is an arboretum to bring another level to it. So whereas we have many parks and they're fantastic, and all cities should have parks, we don't have an arboretum. And you're seeing it's going through so many neighborhoods, you have an opportunity to create something very unique for their neighborhoods. And if it ends up being as unique as we think it will be, not only will developers be very interested in helping to maintain their developments on the Beltline, but hopefully corporations are going to see that this is a unique funding, something unique to fund. We have a lot of conservancies in the city of Atlanta right now, but again, we have the Atlanta Botanical Gardens and Atlanta History Center as major gardens in the city, but we do not have an arboretum, and it's just a really unique possibility for the city. So we really feel that the development communities and support this, as well as a lot of our corporate funders.
Okay. Are you targeting individual developers along the Beltline, and is the city involved with pushing the vision of development, redevelopment community?
The city is actually creating zoning and guidelines for the entire Beltline. So they are working specifically with developers. The developers right now, the development done along the Beltline right now has not had to meet the new zoning until probably the last 6 months. So we have not. We are working. We have some discussion with some of the architects that are working with the developers at this point. But what we really would like to do is help developers in the future to meet the guidelines that are in the overlay districts, or more or less in the zoning for the entire Beltline. So if we can get it into the overlay districts, then the developers will need to meet the guidelines for zoning through these overlay districts, and we'll be here to help them understand the concepts and help them implement it if they need help in implementing it. So you see that the Beltline only at its widest maybe 300 feet wide, and it does incorporate into a lot of new parks that we're adding along the Beltline. But the development along the Beltline is really a great opportunity to increase not only the amount of trees that get planted, but the diversity and fitting into that whole the 12 natural neighborhoods. And we feel that it's going to be a higher density. They're going to have transit on the Beltline. That you have an opportunity to educate citizens and masses, because it's going to be denser developments along the Beltline. So we have a lot of people that are going to be living on the Beltline, and also encouraging the neighborhoods that are connected to it. So I don't know exactly if I answered that question.
Well, we have a couple questions about the larger picture. Some people want to know who the other partners are, how as a group you're moving towards implementation, what the general timeline is, when it's going to be done, things like that. Okay,
so I've other groups, implementation and timeline?
Yeah.
The other groups right now, again, the two main entities are Beltline Inc. and Beltline Partnership. Beltline Inc. again is they are in charge of making sure that the Beltline happens according to the zoning and guidelines, and having everybody on board, working with the community. Whereas Beltline Partnership is much the fundraising tool. There's a tax, I think it's called a tax allocation district that has gone through, and other large funding pieces that are nearly official. And I think it's to raise over $100 million. I can't remember exactly what the amount is. So those are the two major groups. But we also have the Beltline Partnership, which is a group that is made up of citizens, other nonprofits, just generally interested people, some city, as well as some city groups, Parks Department, Watershed Department, and other people who are all on the network. There's multiple groups that are working on this, and it's for Beltline Inc. It's been quite a challenge just to get everybody on the same page. And you can imagine when you have a 22-mile loop, to have what one community needs something different than another community. Affordable housing has been an issue. Historic preservation has been an issue. The neighborhoods are divided into NPUs. We have 26, I think, or 32 NPUs. So neighborhoods are also divided into the NPUs. So the NPUs are involved. There are more players in this than I could name. So as far as players go, the whole community is involved, and it makes it very complex. Path Foundation, which is a nonprofit in Atlanta that basically focuses on bike paths, they are a big player in this. They're actually helping to do much of the fundraising for the first mile. And Park Pride is a nonprofit park group in Atlanta that is trying to help with the creation of the parks, but also the future maintenance. So it is. I mean, everyone is, and of course the city's parks department is one of the major players. It's got full backing by our mayor. It's on its way, and of course there are a few stumbling blocks here and there, and it's such a huge project that they're really thinking 25 years for nearly full implementation. They're doing the overlay zoning right now, and they're dividing it into groups so they can start doing a little bit more focusing on what all the zoning will include. They're also starting to do design meetings where they're actually looking at what they think the green space and path and arboretum will look like. They're already starting to look into site to furniture, such as your benches, your lights, your signage, and trying to get that all started so that when we do this 1 mile implementation, that it's something they can work with in the future. And it is definitely a large project that will spread out through many years, and a little bit of a learning process in this beginning step. Our timeline for our, at least for this 1 mile, is that we will actually have a conceptual plan completed in the next month, a master plan for the 1 mile in the next 2 months. The path will start going in this winter. We'll hopefully start planting by late fall to early winter, planting our first phase in the 1 mile. We're already halfway through our fundraising for that portion. A big portion of what we're going to be doing in this first mile is invasive removal, basically kudzu removal. So that will be being done for the next 5 years, and when we raise money for invasive removal, we do it on a 5-year plan. It's basically the 1 mile will be in the next year and a half, and the next 21 and connecting trails as well will be in the next 25 years.
Great. Thanks, Greg.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to wrap it up here. I have a few more questions online, and I'll follow up with everyone on those, but I do want to hold it to an hour. So if you have a question and you didn't get to ask it, go ahead and still submit it on the chat area to the question manager, and I'll follow up on it. I'll give you a few minutes to do that still. But thanks again to Greg and Prescott. I think this was fantastic. There are obviously a lot of questions, and this is an interest to a lot of people. As another follow-up, I've put together a resource list, and I'll have that as well as the recorded version of this call and the presentations available on our website, and I'll send that link out to everyone, so you'll have that as a takeaway. Otherwise, if you're not familiar with ACT, again, please take a moment just to familiarize yourself with what we do and our other programs, and join the network. So thanks again to Greg and Prescott, to everyone who participated, and to our sponsors, the Home Depot Foundation and the Forest Service. If everyone could take 2 minutes, literally, to go out to that link that's posted right now on SurveyMonkey, and just let me know how the presentation went and how we can make it better, that would be great. All right, so thank you to everyone.
Thanks.
This concludes today's call. You may disconnect at this time.